Welcome everyone to today's LinkedIn live session. I'm Alan Van Roon, Head of Sales here in Sandhill, UK. We're excited to discuss why Erwin is the best solution for current SAP PowerDesigner users. With the future of SAP PowerDesigner uncertain, many organisations are now evaluating how to move forward safely and strategically. In this session, you'll learn what makes Erwin not only a stable alternative, but a significant upgrade in terms of data, governance, collaboration, and long term viability. Before we dive in, let me walk you through what we'll be covering today. This session is designed to give you a clear understanding of what's happening with SAP PowerDesigner, why now is the time to consider a switch, and how Erwin Data Modeler, along with Sandhill support, can help you make that transition smoothly. We'll walk through the current state of PowerDesigner and show you what a migration looks like, including a live demo, and outline the next steps if you're ready to explore this further. And of course, we'll wrap up with a Q&A to answer any specific questions you might have. Now, Jeff, as I understand it, you used to work at SAP.
Yes, thanks.
In fact, you were the
Yes,
last.
Alan.
In fact, you were the last technical resource at SAP, and that was over 10 years ago.
Yes.
As we mentioned, PowerDesigner offered solid capabilities for its time, but it has appeared that for the past decade, the product has stalled in new functionality development. Perhaps you can explain how this impacts current user and how we believe now is the time for client users to move off SAP PowerDesign.
Thanks, Alan. Yeah, I used to work at SAP for about 10 years, and PowerDesigner was one of my products that I specialized in as a support engineer. There has been, unfortunately, no new updates to PowerDesigner since 16.7. And as of this notice here, there's no real future for PowerDesigner beyond 2027. At least there's no roadmap or indication of what's going to happen beyond 2027. So PowerDesigner was a great tool. It still is a great tool, but unfortunately, it's coming to an end. So it's better to start planning on some alternatives like Erwin for the future. So Alan, if you could advance the slide one. Here's some basic information about switching to Erwin. As I stated, the future of PowerDesigner is unknown beyond 2027, but there is a path to convert PowerDesigner models, which we'll talk about later on in the presentation, which will help move you to Erwin. I've not seen any future roadmaps. 16.7 has been the last major update for PowerDesigner. There have been smaller little ones, but no major updates. So during the migration process, all the metadata that you have in PowerDesigner will be preserved and moved into Erwin models. So at some point, support will be discontinued for PowerDesigner. So even if you're using it beyond 2027, you're kind of just using it on your own. With Erwin, you're going to get 24/7 support. There's actually a very good active community of Erwin users that'll help you learn the tool and can answer questions for you about that tool. There's limited platform integration. So basically, PowerDesigner supports the sources and targets of databases currently, but we don't see too much new things going on with that. Erwin continues to evolve with support for cloud databases, SQL, big data, some DevOps type stuff. So they're continuing to invest in the tool and moving it forward. which gets you to the last point, which is there's really going to be no new innovation here. So with Erwin, they're moving towards data governance. There's going to be some AI modeling that's coming in future releases. So essentially, it's not a good idea to just wait to 2027 and then make a decision. It's best to start looking at things now and decide how you're going to move to another platform. So Alan, if you could advance the slide. Architecture is a little different between PowerDesigner and Erwin. So PowerDesigner had 3-level architecture: conceptual data models, logical data models, and physical data models. And you would use this concept of actually generating from one model to another model, which created a linked set of models. Erwin has a different architecture. They have a logical model and a physical model. The logical model basically functions as both a conceptual and logical type model. Within PowerDesigner, you could have a conceptual to a logical to a physical. But when you do the migration, the logical and physical can either be handled one of two ways. You could split it apart, and you could have a separate logical and a separate physical, which would be the general way that PowerDesigner represents things. Or in Erwin, they have the ability to switch between a logical view and a physical view. So during the migration process, you have the option for that. Let's go to the next slide. Some nomenclature about the different model objects. Some model objects have the same name, but there may be some that have a different name. So mostly in PowerDesigner, what you understand to be a model is the same thing in Erwin. And a diagram is a diagram. Business rules are a little bit different in that PowerDesigner has an actual object called a business rule. In Erwin, the business rule is essentially the relationship between entities and tables. Domain concept's the same, except in PowerDesigner, you don't have to have domains. You can actually model without any domains, and you can have specific things like allowable values and things like that built into an object without actually having to define a separate domain for that. It's called a check model. Symbols in PowerDesigner, a symbol is basically just a graphical component that's on a diagram, and you can remove symbols without removing the metadata. Erwin works similar in that you have a symbol, and a symbol and the metadata are essentially the same. So if you delete the symbol, you could in fact delete the metadata as well. You have options for that. PowerDesigner does have some notations about descriptions, and Erwin has descriptions. PowerDesigner has a field called annotations, which lets you put whatever notes you want in. And in Erwin, they call them notes. We have a text symbol and a text block. PowerDesigner does have a kind of text block, but it's a different type of object. So you can actually put in just regular text that you want to annotate something, or you can actually put in a text block, which actually contains more information. Entity relationship notation is available in PowerDesigner, and Erwin has IE notation. The symbols are a little different. In the data modeling world, ER notation was never really standardized. So there's different ways that you represent entity relationship notations here. PowerDesigner does not use the rounded rectangle for the relationship notations for dependencies. Erwin's IE notation does use that. PowerDesigner has sort of a triangle with feet representation. So it'll take a little get used to on the IE notation, but the IDEF, of course, that's an internationally recognized notation standard. So there's no difference there. Erwin has something called UDPs, or user-defined properties. PowerDesigner has what they call extensions. So an extension would be very similar to what Erwin would call a UDP. Let's move to the next slide. Okay, so these are the different differences here when we're talking about logical and physical model objects. So PowerDesigner has a unique thing called a data item that is not in Erwin. But when you do the migration, your data items basically become attributes. So there is no data item concept in Erwin DM. Identifiers become key groups. Entities are entities, relationships are relationships. PowerDesigner borrows heavily from UML. So they call inheritance links are really subtype relationships. So in Erwin, they call them subtypes. And of course, inheritance and subtype categories. So the difference here is PowerDesigner like to use a lot of the UML nomenclature. Okay, next slide. Okay, and the physical side is actually even easier because columns are columns and keys and tables, references, indexes, views or view tables. On the table side of things, PowerDesigner does not make any distinction between what is a fact or a dimension or an outrigger. So in PowerDesigner, they're simply tables. You can, apply some conventions, naming conventions that will help you differentiate these things, but PowerDesigner doesn't treat these things any different than any other table. So when you bring things over, you do have this idea of fact, dimension, and outrigger concepts. As far as DBMSs goes, PowerDesigners will let you know what your current DBMS is. That's the one you're in now. But when you're in Erwin, it's called the target DBMS. Target DBMS in PowerDesigner is a little different, and that has to do with the mapping manager in PowerDesigner, and Erwin doesn't have that. Check parameters. This is the things that I was talking about before when we were talking about domains. The check parameter will actually let you put in valid values, and then Erwin just has a valid value as part of the domain area. Table spaces are table spaces. PowerDesigner has this concept called the storage, which is equivalent to a segment in the Erwin physical data model. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this is where I'm going to introduce my colleague, Kevin Weisenberger, who's going to talk to you about doing the migration from a PowerDesigner model to an Erwin model. So take it away, Kevin.
Thank you, Jeff, and hello, everyone. Let me just bring up my Erwin DM. Okay, I just need confirmation that Erwin is up on the screen.
We're still waiting. Hang on.
Okay. Let's see here.
So at this point, we just want to give screen control to Kevin.
How about now?
Ah, here we are.
Erwin is here. Okay, so this is the Erwin data modeling tool. Just want to show you the latest release of the tool is 15.0. And what we'd like to do is show you how to import a PowerDesigner PDM file and show the extra ways to bring in other types of database type files, other sources into Erwin data model other than a Erwin model itself. So Erwin, when you install the tool, provides a import bridge free at no cost. So what I'm going to do is select import. So out of the box, the import capability is within the tool itself. And it just takes a moment for this to open. Of course, you could always take a Erwin model and export it as any of the other supported bridges within the tool itself. And here it is. And this is the import from external format. It gives you a little bit of an overview, but let's go to the source so that we could see exactly what's supported, or what type of file types are supported. So I'm just going to go to the little drop down here, and you'll see that there's approximately over 100 different sources or types that you can use to import into Erwin Data Modeler itself. So if we just isolate now on SAP PowerDesigner, you'll see that the supported version of PowerDesigner for the conceptual data model is 6.x. The tool also supports 7.5 to 16.x. If we scroll down a little bit more, the logical data model, LDM, is 15.x to 16.x. And I'm just going to go down a little bit more to the PDM, PowerDesigner, 6.1, 7.5 to 16.x. So for this demonstration, or show you how to bring that PDM file into Erwin, I have loaded up a sample physical data model PDM. You have a couple of different consistency checks on the parameter side, and you can make some changes as the source when you're going through the import process. Once you have this established, you could go to the destination, and this is where what Jeff had mentioned earlier. You could select the target database. You'll see here that Erwin supports a wide variety of relational databases here. But also, getting back to the design level or model level, Erwin supports different types of model levels. We're going to select the logical and physical, but you could also generate a logical only model and a physical only model. So I'm going to select leave these defaults. SQL Server 2019 is the target database that we're selecting, and this will start the process of importing the objects from the PDM file, PowerDesigner PDM file, into Erwin Data Modeler. And you'll see here that there's a status log that will either give you some sort of information on whether or not some objects are not brought in, and you could always reference this log file during the or after the import completes to see if there are any issues. We'll take a look at a slide in the deck regarding any limitations of the import. So while this takes a moment to go through the process, what I'm going to do is jump to another Erwin instance that I have opened, and just so basically this is the resultant data model that has been imported from the PDM file. So you'll see here that you could switch between logical and physical. I'm going to isolate on the physical side, and what we have is some. I'll just expand under the Model Explorer the actual number of tables that came in. You could actually go to those particular tables in this particular subject area, and we'll take a look at employee. So I'm just going to go to that particular table, and I'm just going to open that one up under the table properties, and you'll see here that Erwin supports a whole bunch of different SQL Server functionality within these table properties itself. You'll see here that there's a business terms mapping, which is a relatively new within the tool itself. It gives you the ability to see any type of information regarding the business terms in the definitions, key concepts, and metrics of an organization. So you could actually bring this in during the import process from the Mart itself. So that's the central repository that Erwin stores data models in. Again, we have these general tabs. Another nice little feature that was introduced recently is the ability to open up the table editor and goes directly into the column editor within the tool. That way you can actually see some of the, without having to open and close different editors, you could jump to the column editor, which will make you more agile, just a user-friendly capability. So we have our particular columns here, and now what I like to do is examine what came in from the PDM file. You'll see here that we did have a stored procedure that came in. If I just expand on that, and I'll go to the properties, you'll see that that stored procedure came in from the PDM file. We also saw that a view came in. So if I do a go to diagram, the view is highlighted here. And I'm just going to minimize that. And then you'll see that under the validation groups check parameters, you'll see that two of the validation constraints came in. And we see those here with department, range, and sexes. So you'll see that there's definitely it's an easy process as far as importing the models or the PDM model into Erwin Data Modeler. Some of the nice new features within the tool itself, you have this Git integration. We'll get into that a little bit, where you could push DDL to a Git repository. We also have within the tool itself some nice property panes, or where you could get an overview of what's in the data model itself. So if I select property panes, you'll see at the highest level, which is the model level, it gives you general information here regarding the model. But if you actually go in, let me just select a table here. Financial code, it gives you information about financial code, just an overview. And if you want to take a look at a column, it gives you the information about that column as well as the relationships here. So this is some of the nice new features within the tool itself. With regards to the database support. So if I do a file new, I'm just going to show you the target databases that Erwin supports. You'll see that it's a SQL Server model, but it offers a wide variety of NoSQL databases like MongoDB and JSON files, as well as Avro. So these are all supported within the tool itself. So with that, I'm going to return to.
Maybe we can take this time to answer.
Sharing for now.
Maybe we can, Kevin, before you leave, maybe we can address some of these questions that have been coming up. And there's two questions that I would say are more governance related questions. The first one is where the business terms defined, and a little bit more about what is meant by strong data governance in here. And I was wondering if you could show the business glossary concept that's new here in Erwin, so people can understand how that works.
Yeah. So I don't have this set up in, well, it's not in the PDF file, but the way it works is within a DI suite, specifically the Erwin DI suite, you can import your business glossary terms into the MART administrator, MART portal administrator, and then you can associate these business terms to a data model, whether it be at the table level, but you also can do it at, let me just close this editor. You could do this at the column level as well. So any imports would come in from a DI suite.
Right. Okay, so just to clarify that a little bit more, is that the Erwin Data Modeler has an integration with the Quest Data Catalog called the DI Suite. Now, the Quest Data Catalog will basically ingest metadata from data models, and from there you can do workflow, you can do policy, you can do procedure, you can do a lot of data governance functions, you can even run compliance reports on the metadata that you are capturing within the data model. So that kind of sort of is how that works. The other question has to do with cubes, facts, and dimensions from a PDM. Now, within PowerDesigner, you did have the ability to go ahead and select various tables and define them as either being a dimension table or a fact table. And once you've done that, then PowerDesigner would give you the ability to build hierarchical cubes. And at one point, you could actually push stuff out to Cognos and various other cube tools. But essentially, it did allow you to build those cubes. There is no concept that I'm aware of in Erwin that supports meta cubes. Is that correct, Kevin?
Yeah, that is not supported.
So even though you still get to maintain, what is a fact, what is a dimension, snowflakes, various things like that, you can those labels will come through. It's just that there's no mapping for cubes. So at this point, there's no support for that. Now, the other question, which is a very good question, is it possible to sort of automate the import process? Like, can I batch up like a bunch of Erwin models and say, make these all logical physicals and just set it and forget it?
Yeah. So to answer this question, there is a utility out there that we just have that Quest does provide. So there is the capability to use that utility to bring in batch those 200 PDM models.
Okay, so you do have the ability to go ahead and take, let's say, 200 models and batch them up and send them through the import process. Well, that'll make things a lot easier. DBT. Well, I'm not sure I understand what the DBT part means.
Yeah, that's a new feature within the tool itself. It allows the user to generate a YAML formatted file structure or text structures within the tool itself. So yes, it's supported in version.
Okay, great. I think that addresses the questions that we had out here. I didn't want them to linger too long before we answered some of them. I guess we can move on to the next slide here. Okay, so this was the support, Kevin.
Yes. So to keep in line with all the newly supported target databases on the NoSQL side, Erwin does support several cloud-based databases, Microsoft Azure SQL database, Azure Synapse, Snowflake, Alloy DB, and Redshift. So we'll switch, we'll go to the next slide. Okay, and then we have within the tool itself, Erwin now supports the Git collaboration of generating DDL from a data model that's stored in the MART repository. So you could generate the DDL, push it to the Git repository, and the source repositories that is supported by the tool is the GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, as well as Azure DevOps. Next slide, please. And again, we did go over this briefly on the business terms. Again, the business terms glossary or the mapping, you could take this and you could apply the terms to tables and columns in Erwin. Again, this improves the governance and compliance from across your organization. This is relatively new in the releases of Erwin. Again, you get this you can import this information into the MART portal, and then you associate the mappings to data models or the data model association, and then you could map those to columns and tables and all the some other objects within the model itself. Next slide, please. DBT. Okay, so we did have a slide on the DBT. Again, you could take this data build tool or DBT, and what you could do is take this a data model and format it so that you could generate YAML files. I know one of our larger bank customer wanted this as far as support for YAML. So we could take these structures and you could use that in a tool that supports the DBT. Then we have, we could go to the next slide, please. Another supported part of Erwin R15 is this open API, and it's staying in line with the YAML formatted, but also what you could do is reverse engineer and forward engineer of the open API target database, where you could take those, generate JSON and YAML formats. And the way it works is it's a physical only data model where it creates the components when you create the data model itself in Erwin DM. Next slide, please. And then within the data modeling publishing tool, which came about, it's called the ER360 in version 12.5, I believe. So basically now within the tool ER360, you could take the a data model and harvest it into this ER360 tool, and you could have users that are either technical or non-technical be able to access the metadata, see what tables and columns appear in the tool. You could drill down and see what the metadata looks like in read-only format. So within the last several releases of ER360, there have been some enhancements related to the ability to use MetaQL to query what's in the ER360 tables. You also can have a structured search with wildcards, and also within Erwin, you have these UDPs, user-defined properties, where you could apply them to any part of a data model. So that is now published in ER360. There are several other benefits of the latest releases in R15. The diagrams have been enhanced, where you could, within the tool itself, you can now see the subtype relationships if they are defined in the data model. Within the ER360, there's these indexes or automated indexes for improved performance. And then you also have the custom metadata properties, like the ability to look at domains. You could also create worksheets and collections as well. And then ER360 added a cycle to add Jira as a way to create issues, where you could communicate that to other users that use the tool itself. So you would need a Jira account, but you could use Erwin, the Mart, as well as ER360 to generate those issues for communication between the assets, and make changes to any type of to the models or data definitions. So if we go to the next slide, please. And for this one, I think, Jeff, we're going to
I think we can tag team on some of these things.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that I discovered that I sort of listed in the tables before was that there are some differences between, you know, what things are called in between the different tools. And, you know, that's we sort of covered that. Version compatibility. Kevin, I believe you showed that the importer goes all the way back to version 15.
Yeah, give or take. There's a couple of 7 or 6.x.
Yeah,
but anything below that might be different.
So, so from a version compatibility, I would say you're safe if you're probably got, you know, 15 or higher PowerDesigner models. Custom extensions, of course, this is the biggie, where those do not come over in the translator. So essentially, if you have a lot of custom extensions in PowerDesigner, you're just going to have to recreate those extensions in Erwin as, I guess, UDPs, and do the customization that way. On model complexity, now the interesting thing about PowerDesigner, the way PowerDesigner was built, is that you could do lots of different generations. You could generate a conceptual to a logical, then you could generate a logical to an application logical, and then you could take that application logical and generate to multiple physicals, and then PowerDesigner would maintain that complexity of architecture and allow you to drive changes up and down the stack. Erwin works a little bit differently in that, as Kevin showed, there's the one model with a logical view and a physical view. That's one way of approaching modeling. The other way in Erwin is called a derived model. So if you want to build chains of models, you use the derived model approach to derive one model from another model. You can't get the lineage in the model file. You have to go to the Mart or the 360 to get your impact and lineage analysis. So that's a difference between how they handle model architecture. I don't know, Kevin, did you have anything to add to that?
No, but other than with the next slide that we could go over, some of the post import checklists.
I guess, can we handle one question here? Somebody was asking the difference
Sure.
between something called standard and work group. And of those features you were talking about, which ones do you have to get work group versus standard? I think that's the genesis of the question.
Yeah, so that, the question regarding standard and work group, the work, basically you within Erwin Data Modeler, you could do all the functionality with a standard and work group additions. The difference between those two is the work group allows the user to connect to a MARC database to access where their models are stored in the repository. So there's a standard would be local saved Erwin models, whereas workgroup would be models that are accessed from the MARC repository.
Okay. So for PowerDesigner users, you get the repository when you buy PowerDesigner. You can install the repository and use it if you wish, or you can just simply work with model files from the desktop. So I guess that would be equivalent to workgroup is using the repository, and standard would be just regular PowerDesigner without using the repository. So that's how that would sort of map. Let's take a look at these post-import checklists. Like any time you do a kind of a migration, it's always best practice to, of course, make backups of everything that you've got before you do the migration. That's just regular standard operating procedures. But here are some of the things you want to look at after you do the import. Like Kevin showed you, there is a log, and you can save the log, and you can look at the log, and you can see that there are little check mark symbols, I guess little caution symbols with yellow triangles. So those are the things that you will look at when you do the import, after you do the import, to make sure that everything comes through. And one of the things you'll be looking at here is data type validation, make sure those come across, relationship integrity, naming standards compliance. Now, this is an interesting question because Erwin handles naming standards using, it's called an NSM file. Is that correct, Kevin?
Yes.
And PowerDesigner is just a CSV file. So what you would do is, if you want to take your CSV file for the naming standards that PowerDesigner uses, you would bring them into the NSM file, and then you could retroactively refit if you need to some of the naming standards. But whatever you named it in PowerDesigner, that is the code in the name being, of course, logical business name, code being technical physical name, those will come across fine. Just have to double check, make sure they are consistent. And then constraints and indexes, make sure all the PKs and FKs and indexes come across. On this note that in the logical and the conceptual model in PowerDesigner, they're called PIs, primary identifiers, and FIs. It's not until you get to the physical level that we actually call them FKs and PKs, or primary keys and foreign keys. It's just a different nomenclature for how PowerDesigner references things in the different logical and conceptual data models. We have a question here. It says, if multiple PowerDesigner models all use the same PD extension to define a set of extended attributes for entities, how would you ensure that Erwin has a single set of UDPs used by the imported models? That one, I'm not sure, because I don't know UDPs very well. Kevin, do you have any idea about this one?
Yeah, I mean, I've been reading this one.
So the PowerDesigner extension, you can say, I want to attach this extension to multiple models. So they're all using the same UDP, if you will. Does that function work in Erwin, or is it a UDP per model?
I think it's a UDP per model, but I'd like to take that one as that we could research. Okay. Obviously, you could create UDPs on any property or any object in Erwin, but imported.
Yeah, this might be one of the ones where you just have to make a backup of the model, and then after the the import's complete, make sure that you either use the domains or use UDPs to enforce whatever extended attributes you want on the individual models that you want, which might be time consuming, but I think that's the way that you might have to approach that one. Mm-hmm. Okay, I guess we can move to the next slide. Okay, couple of FAQs here. How are naming conventions handled? Of course, we just sort of talked about that. In PowerDesigner, of course, you have the naming conventions file, and then you can have all of your models read from that same file. Erwin uses an NSM, similar concept, just a different way of handling it. PowerDesigner used to be able to do multiple changes at once through the property sheets. Erwin has a concept called a bulk editor, which you can also, I guess, use to retroactively apply some consistent naming conventions across entities and attributes. Assuming that your code and your names are all set in your PDMs, LDMs, and CDMs, you should be able to get all that stuff over there without any issues. Going forward, of course, you're going to want to make sure that you have all of your naming conventions in that NSM file so that it can maintain them when you add new artifacts. How do PowerDesigner's logical models translate to Erwin DM? We kind of saw that. You can tell Erwin during the import process, just create only a logical model, or it will actually derive, I guess, a physical model as well from that if you wish. So logical models just translate to logical within Erwin. Like I said before, you can have a logical physical pairing if that's how you want, but of course you've got to sort of look at what it created for those physical names to make sure those standards are in place and it is what you want. What are the common pitfalls during the migration? Discrepancy between data type support between PowerDesigner and Erwin. Like I said, most of the time, if you're looking at things at the physical level, there's really no discrepancy because they're all based on what the vendor has. In the logical level, of course, we have some what are called in PowerDesigner generic things like char and varchar and things like that, which from my experience translates pretty well. You do have to, of course, check them after it and look at that post-import log and make sure that you don't have any let's say yellow triangles next to it, which would indicate there's an issue. DBMS specific features, compatibility. Like I said here, PowerDesigner supports most of the same, let's call it data sources as Erwin does within the regular ones, like the transactional ones, like Microsoft SQL Server, Oracle, IBM, those types of things. So those things should come through just fine. If you are building, let's say, using the JSON extension as the target and you bring it over, you might want to just double check how that JSON file came through in Erwin. And then any of the reports that you may have created in PowerDesigner, do not migrate, but you can export your reports as either Word documents, PDF documents. You can even do a website, HTML. So I would recommend exporting all of your PowerDesigner reports to other formats that you can then adapt to Erwin later.
So just a point about the reports, Jeff and Erwin. The tool does provide out of the box these pinned reports in the report designer, which really it hits basically all the basic type of reports, but you can also do your point and click type of depending on what you need to report on. So
that's a good
flexibility
point
there,
Evan, because chances are you may have created a PowerDesigner report that already exists in Erwin's standard list of reports, so you don't have to actually recreate it when you do that. So, and the other thing I've found is that a lot of times you create a lot of data models. You may have them in the repository. They might be just files. But you should do some sort of analysis to determine exactly which data models do we have to convert versus which ones were just there and they're just sort of hanging out there, but we don't actually use them anymore. And in some instances with physical data models, it's simply easier to just go and hit that physical database, pull back, reverse engineer the model directly into Erwin, and not really do much with a migration. You get a fresh model and it's associated with the database that you are targeting. So sometimes it's easier to do that than it is to actually do the migration. However, if you use a lot of colors and a lot of annotations and notes and things like that in your data models, then chances are you would benefit from a migration. Next slide, I guess. Okay, we have one more question before we wrap this up. Does Erwin have a way to link two model objects together? Because I want to connect them, like PD has traceability links, ER Studio has universal mapping. So can I map between objects within different models, I'm going to guess?
Yeah, so I think that was one of the functionality that we were going to test with the 15 beta. So the quick answer to this one is to be determined.
Stay tuned.
And but you could always take a model and create a source model. But you have a source model, you could always derive another model from those and add it as a source. So that links those models together. So there's a bit of a linkage of the two. So that's already there in the function.
For the PowerDesigner folks, PowerDesigner uses a couple of different ways to maintain traceability. You could create what's called a traceability link. So you could link a business rule to multiple different data objects. You could use what are called shortcuts, where I could take an entity in model A and put it into model B. Those two are basically linked together. So any modifications I made to model A would automatically be put into model B. So those were the things that PowerDesigner did. And we're at this point for those kinds of things, we are saying stay tuned. And don't have any more outstanding questions, so I'm going to turn it back over to you, Alan, to wrap things up.
Well, thanks for joining us. You've seen the key comparisons, migration strategies, and the exciting new capabilities of Erwin DM Release 15. Our team at Sandhill is here to support you every step of the way, from assessment to migration and beyond. We invite you to book a one-on-one consultation, request our free migration white paper, or access our transition templates. Just reach out to us at info@sandhill.co.uk. Your models, your timeline, our expertise. Let's make your migration to Erwin DM smoother and more rewarding than you imagined. Thank you very much.